Friday, 2nd of February 2024 at Protestia Studios, and this is your intelligence briefing coming to you from Protestia.com, where, of course, you can go to find all the latest in Christian polemics and discernment news. Thank you so much for tuning in. This program brought to you by our wonderful, lovely, and intrepid patron supporters who, for only $5.95 a month and up, support us financially over at patreon.com/Protestia. And we would ask that you would consider doing the same to get, basically to support us, but also to get free, ad-free browsing on the website, full version of Protestia Tonight, and other assorted goodies as the support level goes up. Let's get into the headlines. First headline here at Protestia.com: prominent pro-choice pastor taking over as Reverend Jesse Jackson's successor to lead civil rights group, the Rainbow Push Coalition. That is, the Reverend Frederick D. Haynes III is being formally installed today as president and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition, the successor to Jesse Jackson, who founded the infamous civil rights group more than 50 years ago. Haynes is the race-baiting woke pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church. In 2012, he famously supported Obama's stance on supporting gay marriage, is pro-choice, recently went off on a group that was marching in support of the police, and happened to stop and rest in his church parking lot, making him a perfect fit to lead the decrepit organization. Notably, Haynes was endorsed last year by none other than Pastor Charlie Date. Recently appeared on a conference with Russell Moore endorsing racial justice myths and grievances. This is, no surprise here, I suppose, that this guy would take over for Jesse Jackson and his race-baiting, quote-unquote, civil rights organization. Read more at Protestia.com. Next headline at Protestia: IHOP, that's International House of Prayer, full investigation finds, quote, Mike Bickle engaged in inappropriate behavior, including sexual contact and clergy misconduct in an abuse of power. The International House of Prayer has revealed the full results of the investigation report into the actions of founder and quote-unquote prophet Mike Bickle, prepared by Rosalie McNamara from the law firm Lathrop PM. She says she was allowed unhindered access to all parties involved, except Bickle himself, who declined to be interviewed directly but did respond to written questions, and the primary Jane Doe that Bickle had already admitted to having an appropriate relationship with before the formation of IHOP Kansas City, on the advice of her lawyer. You can go read more about this at Protestia. There are quotes from as you see me scrolling here, quotes from the investigation and whatnot. But you can decide for yourself by going over to Protestia.com. Next headline at Protestia: Alistair Begg dropped from Shepherd's Conference. And they called it an unnecessary distraction. Of course, I took a little issue with that. I'll explain. Alistair Begg will no longer be speaking at the upcoming 2024 Shepherd's Conference, according to a spokesperson for Grace to You to Religion News Service, following the fallout and controversy of his recent remarks advising a grandmother to attend an LGBTQ wedding, and then a much-panned follow-up message justifying his reasons. The quote from Religion News Service said, or the representative of Grace to You said, and it looks like it might have been Grace to You Executive Director Phil Johnson. It looks like it was. After Begg's comments became public, he and John MacArthur talked and decided the controversy would be an unnecessary distraction, according to a spokesman for Grace to You. Which I believe is Phil Johnson here. MacArthur's counsel on that issue would be completely different from the counsel Alistair Begg said he gave to an inquiring grandmother, said Phil Johnson, executive director of Grace to You. They both agreed it was necessary for Pastor Begg to withdraw. Begg has been a frequent speaker at Grace Community Church events, including speaking at Shepherd's Conference in 2015 and 2023, and is a regular guest lecturer for the Doctor of Ministry program at the Master's Seminary. Another related headline here: another prominent Christian ministry quietly parts ways with Alistair Begg. This is after being dropped by American Family Radio, Reformation Network, which is the 24-hour Christian internet radio outreach of Ligonier Ministries. They play content that is, quote, committed to the historic Christian faith and edifying for the whole family. So this quote here: given that there is no such thing as a marriage of two men or a marriage of two women, So take that away. Then what is this occasion that the grandmother is being asked to go to? It is a celebration of perversion and just a celebration of two people promising each other they will never repent of the sin that will send them to hell. Quoted from Dan Phillips, days after being dropped by AFR, American Family Radio, and agreeing with John MacArthur to bow out at Shepherd's Conference, another prominent Christian ministry quietly parted ways with Pastor Alistair Begg following his trash advice to a grandmother to attend an LGBTQ wedding. The few broadcast partners it has, this is RefNet, Legionnaire Ministries, have been thoroughly vetted and, quote, echo the great historical truths that have been well framed by the creedal consensus coming out of the Reformation, including John MacArthur, Harry Reeder, Martin Lloyd-Jones, Ligon Duncan, Steve Lawson, and Charles Spurgeon messages, and up until this last week, Alistair Begg's Truth for Life. Truth for Life was one of the longest running programs going back at least a decade. However, it has been quietly pulled from the lineup with no announcement about its culling being made. This tip was brought into us by Evangelical Dark Web, evangelicaldarkweb.org. Before we get to the last few headlines here, a little bit of commentary about this. Two things. Number one, allowing Alistair Begg to withdraw under the pretext of it being an unnecessary distraction seems like protecting him to me. And whether we want to argue that protection is appropriate or not, this is not the rebuke that he has faced more or less across the board in Reformed circles and with public Reformed and evangelical ministers. I'm concerned that it was described as a quote-unquote unnecessary distraction, considering that LGBTQ issues, pastoral advice given to those who are struggling either with LGBTQ issues themselves or family members that are involved in that lifestyle is perhaps one of the, if not the, most pressing cultural issues pastors are facing right now. So it stands to reason to me that having a discussion over it or a debate or a panel discussion with Alistair Begg would be the exact opposite of an unnecessary distraction. In fact, it should be edifying. If we're talking about one of the major cultural issues facing pastors, this seems like the place to have that discussion. It is, after all, a pastor's conference. Hopefully, the responses going forward from some of these groups become, let's say, a little bit more committed than they seem to be right now. Moving on, next headline at Protestia.com, Transformation Church pastor Mike Todd trashes the stage and destroys a Bible by pouring syrup and whipped cream all over it. This is like the spit in your brother's eye sermon 2.0, I guess. A month after Transformation Church in Tulsa hosted a celebration of life for the late pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ, hell-denying, Trinity-denying, Universalist, Unitarian Bishop Carlton Pearson, with lead pastor Mike Todd praising him as a man of God who faithfully lived out the gospel message. Mike Todd reiterated his contempt for scriptures by trashing the stage, pouring syrup and whipped cream all over a Bible and communion elements as part of a grotesque sermon illustration. I want to see if there's a clip of this. It looks like there is. Let's watch in here.
I need everybody to see this. Yeah. If this is the temple, the house of God, I'm just going to start acting how we be acting with our bodies in the house. My favorite is Chinese food and ketchup. Why you so bothered? Who gonna clean it? Yeah, this is just a house of God. It's just a house. Just a house. Just a house. Who cares? I lift my hands in the sanctuary. I lift my hands to give you the glory. I lift my hands to give praise, and we will praise you.
This is a circus.
Don't care so much. It's just a temple. Syrup all over the communion. Don't care so much. Over the Bible too. Y'all stop acting like you care about this. Stop acting like this matters to you. On the picture, I need to do some artwork on the picture. What'd you say?
Anyway, go over to Protestia's Twitter or this article at Protestia.com to see the rest of that if you so dare. But safe to say that I'm not sure he could be more disrespectful of what supposedly is a church service, supposedly is a sermon, supposedly are elements and symbols used in a worship service. Yeah, that's pretty terrible. Next headline at Protestia.com. Heavy Metal Church sadly announces 2 new church plants, expansion of ministry. In the summer of 2011, senior pastor and founder Brian Smith launched the first heavy metal Church of Christ. Branded with hard rock and metal messaging and ethos, it's clear he's targeting a very particular audience. Yeah, I guess he is. According to the church website, we are a Bible-based church for those who would probably never step foot in a traditional church building because of the snooty, self-righteous, judgmental, legalistic so-called Christians. Let's pause for a second so I can say this kind of outreach done by churches is offensive. It's offensive. Far too many seeker-sensitive churches pull this kind of thing by they promote their church at the expense of other churches. They say, hey, we're not the church full of judgmental Christians. All of those other churches are judgmental and you shouldn't go there, and you're totally justified for rejecting attending those churches, but we're the different church. This sort of church marketing nonsense is awful, and it slanders the bride of Christ, and it should never be done. Never should a church promote itself at the expense of other churches, of saying other churches are awful, but we're the good ones here. That's a horrible thing to do. Back to the article. He insults the kind of church that would say you go to hell for drinking a beer. I'm not aware of any church that says that, but okay. The kind that tells you you'll burn in hell for smoking cigarettes because it's harming the temple. Again, I've not heard that. So a lot of this is straw manning. Like many themed churches before it, there's a focus on us versus them mentality, along with a distinct lack of maturity and learnedness, exemplified by casual cussing, crass humor that permeates the content of the sermons, which are based on heavy metal songs and bands that are really bad. Worship is eclectic, but usually involves a metal band doing hard rock or metal worship. Smith, I guess, is the pastor here, who is part of the secular band Saint Hellion, describes himself as a rebel evangelist for Christ and a rocker through and through. He says, I'm not your stereotypical preacher. That's not my call. I am inked up, bald, and prefer an Iron Maiden tee over a dress shirt any day. This is apparently their Facebook page. Apologies for the crass language. We did not put this up there. They did. And needlessly offensive, and again, insulting and promoting themselves by denigrating other churches is wrong and sinful and should be stopped. Next headline at Protestia. Last headline, at Protestia. Russell Moore's new curriculum exists to give pastors, quote, plausible deniability for avoiding politics in the pulpit and sneaks in beliefs without taking the blame. Months after former ERLC president and current editor of Christianity Today, Russell Moore, joined forces with David French, who recently came out in support of gay marriage and child mutilation, and Curtis Chang, who launched the website Christians and the Vaccine, where he routinely shamed Christians for refusing to get vaccinated, to launch the Afterparty, a teaching curriculum to educate Christians on how to have a proper view of politics. We have begun to see the rotten fruit of their ministry endeavor. At the Evangelical Covenant Church's Midwinter 2024 conference, Curtis Chang reveals that the purpose of the Afterparty is to take the bullseye off pastors by moving political teaching from the pulpit to small groups so that pastors can share their political beliefs without congregants getting mad at them. I think we have a clip here. Let's watch it and see what he says.
It's tempting to think, oh, God, I've got to preach the sermon that will, reframe everything, solve all my problems. And that turns out to be, for most pastors, a really flawed process, because the Sunday morning sermon is actually a really bad way to deal with something like politics. It's one-to-many communication. It's limited. People are bound to misunderstand even, a small thing you say. People will filter what you're saying through their existing political biases. In 30 minutes, I guarantee you, if you go up on Sunday morning in most congregations and you try to preach the one sermon on politics that you haven't been preaching on for a long time, your Monday morning inbox is going to be an ugly scene. And that's honestly why most
I think it's pretty funny that he's promoting this curriculum to encourage pastors to lay off the politics, while he and his buddies, including French and Russell Moore, that's basically their entire framework. The entire reason that their public voices exist are to shame Christians for being involved in politics while they politic themselves. Read the rest of this over at protestia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Intelligence Briefing from protestia.com. Have a good rest of your weekend. Go to church on Sunday and worship with the saints. If you're in Colorado, perhaps I will see you there. For everybody else, as always, Semper Reformanda.